Hello, I'm Scott duPont with another episode of Finance Your Movie, sharing tips and strategies to help you fund your independent feature, documentary, short film, or web series. Our mission is to empower you to get your money to tell your story. Identifying the market for your project, Part 2. In the last podcast, we talked about documentaries and special interest projects, and I really want to dive into the narrative arena here because that's what a lot of folks have an interest in doing ultimately. Um, and one thing a lot of filmmakers make huge mistake is they simply, in their business plan and when they're pitching investors, is they simply say, oh, yeah, we're going to go in this genre. And for example, horror. And the horror market is huge. There's so many horror films. And even at a low budget, they can translate overseas and make money all over the world. And they also translate into different languages. And it's a really hot market. Well, you just can't say that anymore and distinguish yourself from all the other filmmakers looking for money because there's simply too many films, and that's not really a powerful enough sales pitch, in my opinion, to a potential investor. Because they know that investing in any kind of film is risky to begin with. So you wanna come up with what's unique about your project and your pitch. I call it a USP, a unique selling proposition. So a couple things you can dive into with a narrative. Number one, if you're able to get the rights to a book, and it's even better if it's a best-selling book. But if the book has a little bit of popularity, when you're talking to potential investors, you've already identified a proof of concept. This, especially if a lot of books were sold or if the book has a big following, those are people that you've already identified that would be very likely to watch the movie when it's done. And you can clearly market to that initial audience that you can monetize the money. Um, and you see this all the time with big studio films. Just one I saw the other night, Catch Me If You Can. I remember years ago when it first came out. I don't know how successful the book was initially, but once the book was made into a movie, I remember going through every single airport for a couple months. It was in the rack there. Said, "Catch Me If You Can." Now, a popular motion picture starring Tom Hanks and Leo DiCaprio. So there's a lot of cross marketing that goes between the book to promote the movie, and the movie goes back and promotes the book. So that's a really positive thing to share with investors. Another idea, not that anyone here is going to do. You may do a movie of the week, but if I was going to do a movie of the week right now, and those are very low budget. Oftentimes they're between the 1 million and $2.5 million range. I would, if I was the executive in charge of funding a movie of the week, I would say, you know what? I could probably do a movie of the week about President Trump because and he's a very polarizing, a very colorful figure. I don't think anyone in either political party would argue with that. But the one thing you've got to credit him for is he's at the top of every news cycle. And it's been going that way for years. So it doesn't matter whether it's a left leaning news channel, a right leaning news channel, BBC, networks all over the world. He's one of the most recognizable names. And that movie of the week would probably get a lot of viewers, enough to cover their budget. So let's dive into the independent narrative world. And I'm gonna show you an example right now that you may have heard of this filmmaker or some of his films, some of their films, but it's just a crystal clear example of how I believe they first started out. Well, this is the example of the Kendricks brothers, Alex and Stephen Kendrick. I first came across these guys. there was a movie called Facing the Giants that apparently was done for $150,000. And that was pretty incredible considering it's a very wide scope football movie with thousands of extras, multiple locations. Just incredible what they did. And the quality on that budget was not really up to par of any studio, and I don't think they pretended that it was, but it became one of my favorite movies because it was a very touching, inspiring, motivational, positive movie. And those are the type of movies I like. And they really found an audience, and that 150,000 alleged budget, I don't know for sure, but I know some friends that worked on it, made $64 million. It got released theatrically by Sony Pictures. I mean, talk about a success story. Now, going back, the way they got their start is they made a very low, ridiculously low budget, $3,000 movie called Flywheel. And I later went back and bought the DVD of Flywheel because I really wanted to know the backstory of these guys and how they all started. Well, the way they are started is Alex is a pastor, and I believe his brother Stephen as well, at Sherwood Baptist Church. And they wanted to create a series of positive, inspiring movies that their whole, and it's a very large church apparently, that their whole church audience would be interested to. So what I heard, and I'm going to try to get Alex or Steven on a podcast because I would love to talk to these guys. I'm big, big fans of their work. They reached out to their immediate congregation and they said, "Yeah, we're doing this type of film. Da 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 da. I would teach a life lesson. Talks about Christ. Would you be interested?" And apparently they were, and they probably reached out to other churches as well. I know they did in terms of later on and distributing and marketing the film because that made up a huge audience. And this was years before the faith-based audience is as large as it is now. Right now, it's one of the largest growing and most profitable genres of any movie. So if you want to do a faith-based film, there certainly is a market for it. But you really need to do your homework like these guys did earlier on. And then they built up a following after this $3,000 movie, Flywheel, which they shot on a Canon XL1, basically a $2,500 camera. That was basically most of their budget. And technically, the movie was not a very pretty movie. Um, they weren't pretending that they were movie makers at first, but I got to give them credit. They told a really great story, and I actually enjoyed it. And I watched every single one of their films to date, including Fireproof, which is one of their next movies, and their most recent film, Overcomer. So just really figure out, even if you just start with your friends and family, ask about a movie idea you have, and if they honestly, and you're never going to get 100% honest answer. I mean, you might from your closest friends and your family because they don't want to be negative and say, "Oh, that idea sucks." I mean, your really, really good friends should tell you that honestly. But you can also go on SurveyMonkey and some of these platforms. So after you reach your initial family and your friends, that circle, you can go out to circles of influence outside of people you know directly. And I would encourage you to do that before you start putting together your movie package. You really have to identify your audience. And that's just so important. So back in the day, I had to sell a lot of DVDs to break even. But now if you plug into a specific niche audience and you know that in advance and you know that the audience is interested, and let's say for example there's fan clubs, there's a book community that's already bought the book and they love the book, or there's associations about the topic of the movie you're doing that you can plug into later. um, you'll find enough people to click and stream or download your movie to make your money back, hopefully. So if this is your first movie and you can get hold of all your production gear and you can get a lot of your locations for free, just filmmaking 101, you always want to keep the budget as low as possible. But I firmly believe it's possible to make a really, really good looking movie if you have a good crew for under 100,000 these days. And with that budget or anything less, if you understand your market and you identify your specific audience in advance, trust me, your potential investors will be more likely to become actual investors. And that, my friends, is the whole point. Because if there's no if there's no money, there's no movie. Best of luck to you. Tune in next week, or for more info, visit financeyourmovie.com. Thank you for listening, and remember, if you have a story to tell the world, never give up on your dream. Copyright Nemours Marketing.